I'm Jennifer, 72. Sitting at the dinner table, I watched as my daughter-in-law, Stella, fainted dead away after I revealed my hidden fortune of $55 million. dollars. The shock on her face was priceless, and I felt a sense of satisfaction wash over me. This moment had been 3 years in the making, and I was finally ready to expose the true nature of my family. 3 years ago, my husband, George, passed away, leaving me a widow. We had always been careful with our money, living a simple life in a small house. George worked as a mechanic, while I managed our finances and invested wisely. Over the years, we had built up a substantial fortune, but we never flaunted it. We believed in the value of hard work and humility. After George's death, my son, David, and his wife, Stella, started treating me differently. They assumed that I was left with nothing and began to look down on me. Stella, in particular, was cold and dismissive, often making snide comments about my age and financial situation. She would suggest that I move into a retirement home or rely on government assistance, as if I was a burden to them. David, on the other hand, was more passive. He would often avoid conflict and let Stella have her way. He seemed to have lost the kind and compassionate nature that I had raised him with. I was heartbroken to see the change in him, but I decided to bide my time and observe their behavior. I came up with a plan to test their true character. I pretended to be a poor and helpless widow, struggling to make ends meet. I sold our house and moved into a small apartment, which I actually owned but let them believe was rented. I wore old clothes, bought generic groceries, and apologized for not being able to contribute more to family gatherings. At first, David and Stella seemed to pity me, but as time went on, their true colors began to show. Stella became even more cruel, openly mocking me in front of my grandson, Ethan. She would tell Ethan that I was not really part of the family and that he should not waste his time with me. Ethan, who was only 7 years old at the time, was confused and hurt by his mother's words, but he still loved me unconditionally. I documented every slight, every dismissive comment, and every moment of humiliation. I knew that one day, I would use this evidence to expose their true nature. I also made sure to stay in touch with my attorney, who helped me manage my investments and prepare the necessary legal documents. The turning point came during a family trip to a cabin in the mountains. We were sitting on the porch, enjoying the evening, when Stella suddenly snapped at Ethan. "She's not your real grandma," she shouted. "She's just your father's mother. She's not really family like us." I felt a pang of pain in my chest, but at the same time, I felt a sense of relief. This was the moment I had been waiting for. I had finally received the confirmation I needed that David and Stella were not the people I thought they were. I smiled to myself, knowing that the time had come to reveal the truth. I texted my attorney, who was standing by with all the legal documents. I told him to have everything ready for the next evening's dinner. The next day, I surprised everyone by suggesting that we have a special dinner. I offered to cook, much to Stella's annoyance. She tried to discourage me, saying that the kitchen was too small and that I was too old to cook a big meal. But I was determined to make this dinner a memorable one. I went to the local market and bought the finest ingredients, including prime steaks, fresh vegetables, and a decadent chocolate dessert. I spent the afternoon in the kitchen, preparing the meal with love and care. When it was time to serve dinner, I could see the shock on their faces as they saw the delicious spread before them. As we ate, I watched their expressions change from surprise to suspicion. Stella kept asking where I had gotten the money to buy such expensive food, and I simply replied that I had found some good deals. David was too busy checking his phone to notice the tension at the table, as usual. Finally, I decided it was time to reveal the truth. I set down my fork and looked at them all. "I think it's time we had an honest conversation," I said. "You see, I've been living a lie for the past 3 years. I'm not the poor and helpless widow you thought I was. In fact, I'm a wealthy woman with a fortune of $55 million. dollars. Stella's eyes widened in disbelief, and David dropped his phone. Ethan looked at me with a mixture of confusion and excitement. I continued, "I've been testing you all to see who you really are. And I have to say, I'm very disappointed. You have treated me like a burden, like an unwanted guest in my own family. You have shown me that you value money and status more than love and family." Stella was the first to speak. "You're lying," she said. "This is some kind of cruel joke." But I showed her the tablet with my investment accounts and real estate holdings. "There's no joke here," I said. "This is the truth." David looked at me with a mixture of anger and shame. "Why would you do this to us?" he asked. "You've been lying to us for 3 years." I replied, "I needed to know who you really were. I needed to see if you would still love me and respect me, even if I didn't have any money. And you failed the test." Stella stood up, her face red with anger. "This is insane," she said. "You can't just lie to your family like this." I looked at her calmly. "I didn't lie to you. I simply let you reveal your true selves. You treated me like a burden because you thought I had nothing to offer. But now that you know the truth, you're suddenly interested in me again. That's not love, Stella. That's manipulation." At that moment, Stella fainted, collapsing to the floor like a puppet with its strings cut. David rushed to her side, while Ethan looked at me with wide eyes. I sat back in my chair, sipping my wine, feeling a sense of closure. After Stella regained consciousness, I laid out the terms of my will. I explained that my estate would be held in trust for Ethan until he turned 25. The trustees would be my attorney and a financial management company, not David or Stella. I also set up a fund for Ethan's education and general welfare, which would be administered independently. I told them that if they wanted to have a relationship with Ethan and me, they would have to prove themselves. They would have to treat me with respect and stop trying to manipulate Ethan. Otherwise, the money would go to charity. David and Stella were shocked and angry, but they knew that they had no choice. They had to accept my terms if they wanted to be a part of Ethan's life. Over the next few months, they slowly began to change their behavior. David started visiting me more often, and Stella learned to be more respectful. 6 months later, I was sitting in the sunroom of my new house, watching Ethan help me tend to the garden. David and Stella were on their best behavior, and I could see that they were making an effort to rebuild our relationship. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Looking back on the past 3 years, I realized that sometimes the greatest victory is simply refusing to be diminished by other people's limitations. I had learned who my true family was, and I was grateful for the lessons I had learned. I was also proud of myself for having the courage to stand up for what I believed in and to expose the truth. Now, I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar?
Comment below.
And meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.